Hey, future people who will be rewatching this video. Um, I'm just waiting for people to roll in. This is a live Q&A. I took a bunch of questions for it on YouTube the past couple days, as well as Instagram, and I got all of your questions printed out. So I'm gonna hopefully wait for some people to show up. Right now it's just one person, which is great. Oh, there's two. Now we're rolling. But yeah, normally I do these Q&As on Instagram, but I thought, well, why don't I do the live Q&As on YouTube? And then I can do the pop-up classes live on Instagram to make it fair to go back and forth. Um, so yeah, all right, we're rolling. Oh, look at that. It said I had two people. Now I have more than two. So that works. Okay, so what I did is I let everybody on a community post submit their questions. And when people voted for like a thumbs up, like that comment, I did my best to make sure that I answered that question. I also picked some off of there that I found intriguing, and then I did a live Q&A box on my Instagram stories, and people submitted a ton of questions. And then this is all of the questions I'm gonna answer today. Oh, I didn't set a timer. I've been doing this for years, like lives, and I'm never as prepared as I should be. I never am. I'm gonna try to set a timer. Well, I am gonna set a timer. I know I have the capacity to do that. Um, and that way I don't talk for more than an hour, because I do want to start doing these weekly, but the best way for me to do that is to not burn myself out on, because my brain, as some of you know, won't ever stop. I will give you information until I lose my voice, but my body's like, please have limits, right? And so I am working on doing that. Okay, so let's jump right in. Remember, I am not a doctor. This is not medical advice. It's just me and you having a conversation as a friend. These are things that I would look into further if I was you. And if you're on any medications, all that kind of stuff, make sure to talk to your doctor before starting anything new, you know. Okay, so the first question right out the gate, and there was like 80 of these because people ask this all the time, is what are the best herbs, teas for parasite removal or to assist in parasite removal for the duration of a parasite cleanse? Thank you. First, let's talk about the fact that as a society, especially women, we have been conditioned to believe that like we are dirty. We are inherently dirty inside. We're full of bugs and blood and shit and nasty things that we should purge out, right? It's the puke, poke, purge mindset. And now I'm not saying that people don't have parasites, because we definitely are, we're mammals. We can get parasites like anybody else. But the first thing I want to say to people is make sure you have a parasite before you jump into somebody being like, oh, you have skin issues because you have a parasite. Oh, you have stomach issues because you have a parasite. And again, that could be the cause, but like if you don't know what the parasite is, it's really tricky. So they have these new, not really all that new, but you can hop online and you can buy like a stool test kit that looks for the literal DNA of like parasites in your shit. Right? And so now you'd want to find one that's like more comprehensive. Some only test for a handful of common things, other ones test for like thousands. And so if you find out, if you take that test, and you're like, well, that'll cost money. Well, yeah, but if you're going to be throwing stuff at your body to kill a parasite that you don't have, you're kind of losing money versus being like, okay, let's find out if I actually have a parasite. And then if I find out what type of parasite it is, I can do a bunch of things. Like I can say, well, how long is the life cycle of this parasite? That's important, because let's say you want to start taking diatomaceous earth or Oregon grape root or things like that to help with parasites. Let's say you're like, well, I'm going to take this diatomaceous earth for like a month mixed into some yogurt or whatever. But what if the life cycle is a month and 10 days? Right? What if the eggs hatch 10 days after you stop, or however its cycle continues, right? So if you find out what it is, you're no longer swinging in the dark. And beyond like finding out its cycle, you would also have the capacity to say, well, what impacts it? Are there safe antibiotics I can use? Are there herbs that are similar to this antibiotics? Because some stuff just isn't affected or impacted by some of the herbs and things that you might typically use for a parasite cleanse. But I still feel like it's important that we like look at the concept of like just being told that we're dirty, right? And be like, okay, well, what's really going on? Finding out if I really have it, and then making a game plan. Okay, so this person said, my mom's lungs haven't been the same since she had the C word. She always has a cough now. Is there anything she can take to heal them? And then at the same, another question from a different person, but I kind of lumped same ones together, right? Like, is there an herb that I could consume in tea form to serve as a cough suppressant? I have COPD and hate going to the doctors taking meds. Um, for both of these things, I would look into Mullein infusion daily. I have a video about that on my YouTube. If you're not lactose intolerant, I highly recommend whole milk. If you can get raw milk, that's even better. There's a huge myth that milk causes phlegm. Now, if some people have an allergy to it, you can have that reaction, like if you're dairy intolerant type of situation. But for those that aren't, did you know did you know it was like the 1700s, and there was this guy that wanted to see how different things impacted the blood, and so he would eat food for a day or so, like just the one food, and then he would cut himself and see if it looked thicker. That is literally where the myth came from, that milk causes like slimy buildup in your body, and I'm like, that science isn't sciencing, folks. But for those who aren't intolerant, it's really, really amazing for lung health, especially when you blend it with the Mullein infusion, which I would drink daily. And then there's tiger's milk mushroom. I know it's a funny name, but it's a really, really fantastic mushroom that supports respiratory issues, regardless if it's something that you got from having C word or if you had COPD or anything like that. Now, my son in 2020, you know what happened, but we got it in 2019. I don't care what anybody says. We did, like at the end of 2019. And then we had that year of smoke. Like, I'm here in Northeast Oregon, and there was like 2 months that we literally basically couldn't see the sun, and suddenly my son had asthma. Right. And it was devastating to him because he spends a lot of time hiking outdoors, going up mountains, just because he literally wants to see what's up top there. And then suddenly he had asthma. And so we were working with the mullein leaf infusion, and it was helping some, but I did a bunch of research, and I was like, okay, well, tiger's milk mushroom. And I shit you not, in 3 months of him using this tiger's milk mushroom, his asthma went away. And it was so frustrating because when we took him to a doctor for his asthma, like we waited forever to get him into a specialist, the name evades me for asthma respiratory doctor, something like that. This guy, it took us like 3 months to get in there. He's like, yeah, asthma just happens. Here's an inhaler. And I'm like, yeah, but he didn't have asthma growing up at all. There's no real asthma in our family, right? There was the smoke and the C word came along, and he was like, no, just asthma. He'll have asthma for life. Okay, well, my son doesn't have asthma anymore, so apparently not. So I would look into the mullein infusion daily and the tiger's milk mushroom for healing from a chronic cough or dealing with COPD, if you quit smoking, anything like that. Okay, so, oh, someone says, I've been trying to find mullein everywhere. I think I'm going to have to cave and order some online. You know what's funny? Is mullein is everywhere unless she decides to be elusive. But it's okay to order online too. A lot of people don't have access to gather fresh, to dry to make for infusions and stuff. Just look for organic if you can afford it, and if not, it's better than nothing. They're not growing these like industrial crops, so it's probably not sprayed with much, honestly. Um, but looking like she really likes disturbed soil, so look for anywhere that's recently been clear cut, plowed, any of that type of stuff. Although stay away from agricultural, like the side of the road, right? Like you're like, oh wow, those are so big growing next to the wheat field or whatever. I'm like, well, yeah, because they're pumped full of chemicals, right? Okay, the next question is, oh, and this is a good one. This person says, in case not everyone's aware, there's a new and unexpected dog respiratory illness going around in the US now and Canada. It's unresponsive to current antibiotic treatments, and many dogs are going downhill fast, and sadly, many more are passing away. What can we give to our dogs to boost their immunity? And would you suggest and what would you suggest? I picked a shit ton of turkey tail and have been simmering that in her and the cat's drinking water, but I don't know what else or remotely how much often to boost their water. So I would like to say, because this word isn't banned yet that I know of, it's probably related to the white lung that's going around. Can we just talk about the fact that there's this new unresponsive pneumonia going around in humans at the same time there's a new unresponsive pneumonia going around in dogs. Um, from what I've seen with that, it produces lots of endotoxins. I haven't seen much in regards to the dogs because, they're not jumping on that the same way they are what is getting a bunch of kids sick, right? But I would, first of all, with cats, just right out the bat, you need to be careful working with herbs with cats because their livers cannot, in any way, shape, or form, process phenols, right? So that means like plants have phenols, you give them something like, I don't know, mole infusion, it may or may not be able to process through their livers. Although, just to say, phenols are typically higher in herbs that have a lot of fragrance, like catnip or mint or something like that, than they would be in mullein. But actually, I was talking about, I did that What We Know Wednesday, the first one ever, uh, last Wednesday. And I was talking about sarsaparilla root and its capacity to bind to endotoxins. And by the way, I decided to do that one first because I was looking at what's coming. Right, whether it's for you or your dog, I like the fact that it binds to endotoxins and knocks down the cytotoxic storms, which is massive inflammation in the lungs and things like that. So I would look into that. I know there's a long history of people using sarsaparilla root with dogs. With cats, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it's impacted cats. I haven't seen anything about that. But with cats, sarsaparilla root will have a lot of phenol, so they probably won't be able to process it out. Okay, so, my friend is on let me try that again with English words. My friend is on opioid meds for spinal nerve pain and is still suffering. Is there a natural remedy for nerve pain? So, topically, you could use St. John's wort oil is really fantastic for helping with nerve related agitation, pain, and even repair. And of course, internally, you could start working with lion's mane mushroom. She's really fantastic at rebuilding like neural pathways and nerve endings and things like that. But also make sure that they are getting a lot of B12 in their diet or that they're not B12 deficient. It's really, really important for cell regeneration as well as like nerve function. Like if anybody, and I got quite a few questions about like sciatica. Like if you have sciatica pain, it can come from a lot of things, but most of the time there's B12 deficiency involved. In fact, it's like one of the symptoms of B12 deficiency, especially if it's progressed, because you really need the B12 for basically the sheath around your nerve ending to function. And a lot of people go and get B12 shots for sciatica pain. So there's a real possibility that you could get B12 shots weekly or so for nerve pain in the back and things like that as well. And before anybody freaks out about overdosing on B12, remember that it's water soluble and you piss out whatever you need. It's literally impossible to overdose on B12. Now, it can lower things like potassium and folate and iron, so you have to make sure that you're eating a diet rich in those too, right? Because your body, like if you have all this B12, it needs these other precursors to function. But also check out magnesium deficiency. And remember that even if you're taking a magnesium supplement, sometimes your gut can't really absorb it depending on how impacted your gut health is and other factors, like if you drink coffee, which blocks magnesium absorption. But you can make the magnesium oil, and I have a video on that, and apply it topically. And if you put that oil on and you start burning and tingling, you're magnesium deficient, because what's actually happening is you're feeling your skin pull in the magnesium so quickly that it feels like it burns or tingles or itches. And that's a good test to do on yourself. If you feel it in any way absorbing into your skin other than just sitting on there, you're magnesium deficient. Now you could take um, magnesium baths too, once a day, especially if you believe you are magnesium deficient. In a month, if you did that daily, you would probably push back against that deficiency better than if you were taking a capsule internally. Um, okay, so somebody said in all caps, is it okay to replace alcohol for vinegar? And they were talking about in regards for tinctures. It is okay to make an herbal infused vinegar. but it's not a tincture, and it never will be a tincture, and it won't extract any of the alcohol soluble properties that you would find in an alcohol based tincture. And before somebody says use glycerin, glycerin is just a fatty alcohol, and that you just don't feel intoxicated from it because your liver really struggles to it struggles, it can't process it. So glycerin can cause like diarrhea, intestinal upset, all kinds of issues. I use it sparingly and only in conjunction with alcohol and herbs that need the fat soluble compound. But herbal vinegars are beautiful. Just remember that it's not like a tincture. You'll need to use bigger amounts. Tinctures, we're typically taking drops, versus with vinegar you need to like take like a couple tablespoons to 1/4 cup at a time. um, you could also add honey to that and make it an oxymel. I have vinegar on both. I have videos on both oxymel and infused herbal vinegars and stuff. Okay, so I just saw somebody asking a question. I'm trying to not bounce too much back and forth between here, but somebody just asked, is it safe to use alcohol tinctures for dogs? Yeah, in small amounts, but not for cats. But with the dogs, I would add it to some warm water and let it evaporate off, right? Their bodies are a little bit more sensitive because they're smaller, even if you have a really big dog. They don't really work the same way as humans, but with cats, absolutely not, just before anybody else asks. Okay, I got through a page of questions. I probably shouldn't get too cocky. I got 4 more pages left. Um, Okay, so this person says, howdy, I'm curious about some remedies for adrenal fatigue caused from living in fight or flight from CPTSD. My cortisol levels spike in my sleep, which wakes me up abruptly in the night. Thanks so much. So, first, hey, how you doing? My name is April, and my capacity to live off of stress hormones and burnout, and I was on disability for a decade for CPTSD. Like, I deeply understand this on like a personal level. And so I'm going to share some things that I did and some things to consider here. First of all, are you under eating? It's really, really common. It's really common, or it can be either way. Some people overeat from stress, and some people undereat from stress. If you don't, if you're not genuinely overweight, you're likely undereating from stress, and you might be avoiding things like carbohydrates because people, and especially women, have been made to think that if we eat any sort of fucking fruit or a root vegetable or a little bit of like cane sugar and something, that we're like killing our body. But every cell in your body runs on glucose, and if you don't eat enough carbohydrates, your body starts deteriorating your own muscles by jacking up cortisol levels. Um, so it can basically rob the glucose from your meat, right? Your muscles start to waste. You live in chronic fight or flight. You're always stressed out, right? People are like, I feel great when I fast. I'm like, well, stress hormones feel amazing at first until they don't. So the thing that really helped me is starting to eat more and eating consistently, 5 times a day. And that sounds crazy, but it's like 3 main meals and snacks in between. It's not that big of a deal. I went from weighing like 92 pounds to I waver between about 133 and 134, and my life has changed. I had complete flipped cortisol levels to where I had basically dangerously low cortisol levels during the day and then dangerously high cortisol levels at night. And for those who don't know, your cortisol levels exist in a rhythm, right? When you wake up, they're like the highest because your body's like, all right, our liver's out of glycogen, which is like how your liver keeps your blood sugar and everything stable at night. So you wake up, right? And it's meant to be like, you need to eat, and then you eat, and then they start coming down, and then they kind of steady out through the afternoon, and then in the evening, in theory, your body starts slowing down cortisol production and increases melatonin production naturally, right? But when it flips, it's a whole different ballpark. So how many people here wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning suddenly? Well, that's about the time your liver runs out of glucose, right? And so what happens is, in an attempt for your body to stabilize your blood sugar, it jacks up your cortisol levels because, again, it uses cortisol to rob glucose from your muscles. And then you're like wide fucking awake, right? Because suddenly your cortisol levels are really high and your melatonin levels have dropped. So the answer here isn't to take more melatonin. The answer here is to say, how can I treat my liver better? How can I treat my body better? But can I eat more carbohydrates just before I go to bed? Am I making sure that I'm eating enough carbohydrates throughout the day, right? And so that really started to help me, and people are going to lose their shit. But I eat about half a pint of Haagen-Dazs ice cream before bed every night, and I sleep like a fucking baby. I do not wake up. I don't wake up to turn over. I don't wake up to nothing. And that is completely different person from who I was a couple years ago, right? Now, I say Haagen-Dazs because if you get their vanilla, strawberry, or chocolate flavor, that's it. Those three are really clean. There's literally nothing besides sugar, milk, eggs, vanilla, or chocolate or strawberries. There's nothing else added. There's no nasty xanthan gum. There's no fucking essential oils. There's no chemicals, artificial flavors, none of that stuff. They're clean. They're cleaner than any organic brand that I have available to me. Um, but then you can also like step into working with herbs that help. So you can work with ginseng, you can work with shilajit. These are pretty good at helping support our thyroid, and our adrenals are actually on our kidneys. This is our thyroid, but I always kind of point to their function because they're interconnected, right? It's the HPA axis. But the thing is, herbs don't work if your body's still depleted, right? Like, I do not want somebody to take some ginseng, which is kind of a stimulant. Although I would go with like the American ginseng versus the Siberian. It's a little more cooling and not as energetic than the other varieties. Um, but if you are running on stress hormones and nothing else, and you're under eating, and remember, an adult woman at rest needs 2,500 calories a day minimum. If you are stressed out and trying to recover, you should probably aim for 3,000 to 3,500 calories a day. And people are going to lose their shit when I say this. I'll have tons of women in the comment section later telling me, oh, that's not true. My body doesn't work that way. Yeah, it does. It's fucking biology. Nobody's body is different. Like, your liver needs to store glycogen throughout the day. And the only way to get that is to eat carbohydrates. And you're not a toddler, and you are allowed to have fat on your body, right? Okay, so assuming you get that in place, and assuming you're doing good sleep hygiene stuff, like not looking at glowing screens an hour or so before bed, and making sure there are no lights in your bedroom, and you're eating enough, then you could start working with things like the shilajit, or which is a resin that's really cool, or you could start working with the American ginseng. Now, I did that stuff for about year and a half, and it made a big difference, and I was continually testing my cortisol with spit testing. Blood cortisol tests are fucking pointless. You go to the lab, they take your blood in the morning, you haven't eaten, you're freaked out because they're poking you with a needle, and then they only look at that snapshot of cortisol in your body at that moment, and they're like, you're fine. But if you'd order a spit cortisol test online where you spit in these tubes every so many hours throughout the day and you send it in, it could be like, well, yeah, it looked fine here, but at night you're fucked. It's really high because, again, your cortisol works in rhythms, right? Um, so you need to look at the whole picture. And I was doing a lot better, but I could not get my cortisol as low as I wanted it in the evening, and so eventually I started working with cyproheptadine. And people are like, "Ooh, an herbalist that uses medications," but I'm all about the old school meds that have been around all the time. There are lots of times where I'm like, penicillin is amazing, right? Penicillin's fantastic. You know, things like cyproheptadine, which is an old school class 1 antihistamine, but they don't really use it for that anymore because it makes people feel kind of sleepy and hungry, right? They've gone on to the new non-drowsy stuff, a bunch of different stuff. But cyproheptadine, beyond the fact that it's, low grade antihistamine, has the capacity to drastically lower cortisol levels, right? And if you've been under eating because you're stressed out, you're not hungry. You're like, I just don't feel hungry in the morning. Well, that's stress, right? And so cyproheptadine encourages your appetite, and it was a game changer for me. I had made a lot of headway on my own, but it was like, you believe that it's going to take years and years to come out of burnout, and I started using about 2 milligrams of cyproheptadine every evening, and in about a month my cortisol had completely regulated. It was fucking crazy. You have to get a prescription for it, but it's pretty easy to get. It's so easy to get. You can be like, I'm like, hey, I need cyproheptadine for my allergies or whatever, or I use it for stress, and they're like, okay, from the online app. You give them like 40, $50, and then they're like, cool, and then they send it off to whatever pharmacy you choose. So I know I jabbered about that one a lot and a bunch of technical stuff, but Obviously, it was a personal thing for me. um, okay, so this next question is autoimmune diseases. What to watch out for when using herbals. So it depends on your autoimmune. If your autoimmune is like running really high, like if you're sick all the time, or something's deteriorating because your autoimmune, your immune system is overreacting and like attacking your body in some way, you really, really, really need to stay away from any herb whatsoever that stimulates your immune system, because you're just going to be giving your autoimmune like a weapon to make things worse, right? Like but if you have an autoimmune that makes your immune system really, really low, right, because it's not just one size fits all, you could carefully and slowly work with herbs that stimulate your immune system, but be really careful that you're working with whole herbs, and people will lose their shit. But like most essential oils that people use, and again, I've written a whole research-based book on why I don't use essential oils and why they're fucking deadly. But they actually repress T cells most of the time. So if you're being like, oh, I use this for my autoimmune, you're like, it's gotten so much worse. I'm like, well, you're repressing it's to the point that actually in my chapter about like skin, like topical use, um, essential oils are so effective at repressing the immune system that they're starting to work on patenting a particular combination that stops your fucking skin from healing itself. It stops T cells from coming and like making new cells and healing things. So if you have like a flesh eating autoimmune, and I've had a friend that had that, her son did, and his skin basically fell off his body. It was fucking crazy. Something like that would be beneficial, but most people are exposed to this stuff and everything they work with. But there's one herb, mushroom, that kind of works in between the lands, and that's turkey tail mushroom. She is really fantastic for modulating the immune system. But watch it. If you have an autoimmune where if it flares up you'll fucking die, don't mess around and try. But if you're like, well, it's not great when it flares up, but it won't kill me, you could start working with turkey tail to see in small amounts if it makes you better or worse. Okay, so, oh, and I guess I should say, and I talked about this, I believe, I don't know if I talked about it on my last live in the park where I met up with people, but anybody with an autoimmune disease, just Google LDN or Research Trust. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. But just Google LDN Research Trust. It will probably be something to consider in combating autoimmune issues. Okay, so let's see what the next one is. Ouch. My husband just had a slow bleeding ulcer. His hemoglobin plummeted to 6.1. What are the best herbs to heal a stomach ulcer? First of all, has a doctor been knowledgeable enough to test him for H. pylori? Right. That's a bacteria. It's 99% the reason anybody gets an ulcer, beyond like maybe crazy diet issues, but like most of the time you have H. pylori. So like using things to combat H. pylori would be really important. You can use antibiotics for that. Some people feel like it makes it worse depending on how bad the situation is, right? But you can also use things like mallow root infusion. I would do the cold brew versus the warm brew. That's just like 1 ounce of mallow root, put into a quart jar, which is 4 cups of water, cold, poured over top. Let it sit until the next day, strain it, drink it. It kind of, to me, tastes like a tortilla chip. It doesn't taste bad, and that would help kind of act like a band-aid. Now you could also work with slippery elm and or both. I have a slippery elm ball video that you can watch. It's better to do it that way. It's kind of, if you try to mix slippery elm into water and drink it, it gets really slimy and it's kind of suffocating to drink. But if you mix it with honey and make it like a dough and turn it into these little balls, you can suck on that, and that will help heal that. And I was actually just reading, and I'll talk more about hibiscus as an herb, because people did ask about her quite a bit. Um, Hibiscus has an affinity for protecting against ulcers, and if I had to guess, it's probably because her high vitamin C content. might be acting like the bacteria killer that it is and pushing off the H. pylori load. But I would stay away from anything acidic. But also, hibiscus is actually, even though it's really sour, it's not as acidic as people would assume it is. But also, I assume that they have him on medication already. He's probably on Prilosec or something for the next 30 days so it can heal. Another one I would actually be comfortable using afterwards would be famotidine, which is actually Pepsid. It's a really, really safe, long-term, like, med that's been around for a long time. And actually, it's more of an antihistamine than it is you have to take really large amounts of it for it actually to stop your stomach acid. It works more like an antihistamine, and it actually lowers stress hormones. And remember that a lot of stress hormones like serotonin are made in your gut. People are like, oh, serotonin is a happy hormone. No, it's a stress hormone. Um, okay, so oh yeah, also I would highly suggest with losing that much blood, I've been there, not with an ulcer, but almost bleeding to death. I would be on liver supplements or eat liver for the next year to build that hemoglobin back up. Even if they tell him it's fine, there'll be ramifications on his body. Um, okay, so all I saw was somebody say my diet is literally coffee, stress, and my own tears. Um, Yeah, somebody said Cipro doesn't work for them to gain weight. I know it can be really hard, but if there's like a mental health component there too, it's something that we have to address. And I say that as like my teenage daughter. We've been living with eating disorder situation for like the past 3 years. She's come a really long way. One thing that might help you is to look into B12 shots. If you're under eating, you're likely deficient in B12. It makes a big difference in her mental health. Also, lithium orotate, which people get scared when they hear the word lithium because they think of like a hardcore pharmaceutical, but lithium orotate is like in its natural state, and it really helps lower um, glutamate levels in the brain, which helps us relax, which helps us lower stress levels. And when she works with B12 shots and lithium orotate, like I notice the difference of how much easier it is in comparison to when she's not taking it for her to complete a meal. Uh, the dog in the background, Charlie. Something was outside. I think FedEx showed up, so I made him bark. He's a good little 2 pound dog that will like fuck people up. Nice, really nice dog. Okay, so here's another big question. Um, okay, so let me take a drink here because this is gonna be a doozy. Herbs for the brain, dealing with dementia, specifically Lewy body dementia. Any suggestions on strains of cannabis and other herbs to promote reconnection in the brain? I feel this person has connections lost by too much sugar over 40 years. Myelin crystallized and broke, hence the connection breaking. Diet change has helped arrest it, but feel more can be done. Okay, first of all, stop. Sugar does not cause dementia. Your your body needs glucose. In fact, the lack of eating carbohydrates will cause, again, that cortisol to rise, and cortisol brutally kills your brain and your neural connections. And in fact, it shrinks your brain matter too. Now, the thing to know about Lewy body dementia is that it primarily functions by attacking the dopamine receptors in your brain. You are no longer producing and or able to synthesize dopamine. And dopamine is actually what makes you happy, but lack of dopamine, severe lack of dopamine will make you hallucinate. It will make you have an inability to remember words. It's also like, so it could be long-term stress. It could be the fact that, now I don't know this person, but like, okay, so Robin Williams died of Lewy body disease, and a lot of celebrities are coming out from the 80s that have Lewy body disease. Well, they have kind of correlated the fact that high levels of cocaine use cause Lewy body dementia. It doesn't mean that this person was using that, but it also could be from overuse of stimulants in any other way, right? It's also technically incurable. It's fatal, and it's a brutal way to go. Um, Charlie, he's like, there's somebody here. um, anyhow, so if I was looking to support somebody's neural pathways, the last thing I would do is smoke cannabis. Like, I don't know what world people think that cannabis and cutting off oxygen to your brain with THC would help restore neural connections. Maybe CBD, right? But if I wanted to restore neural pathways and slowly push back the onslaught of this type of dementia, I would look at eating way more healthy animal fats. Your brain needs so many calories. It needs cholesterol. If this person took statins, it's probably also, we're not allowed to talk about that in the US, but statins are pretty much illegal everywhere else. It's very possible that it degraded that area of the brain. I would look on increasing dopamine production, which you can do with things like ginkgo. I would look on lowering glutamate levels as well as lowering nitric oxide, because all of those things compete for the same receptors. And when those levels, like if you have a shit ton of like stress hormones in your body, or you have a ton of nitric oxide going on, like your dopamine can't really be produced. These things work in tandem. If one is really high, one is really low, so ginkgo would be a good one to work with. But also, there's this thing that you can get a prescription for these days that people are using it for depression, and it's ketamine, right? A low dose. You're not like taking shit tons like you're, on like this huge amount of drug. The thing about ketamine is the reason that it's helping with depression and anxiety and stuff is because it rebuilds the neural pathways. Get where I'm going there? Right, like if I had a problem with neural pathways breaking down, I would highly consider something that helps build those neural pathways, but also the thing about ketamine is it lowers glutamate levels drastically, right? So that's just something like, so somebody just said all loud, we can't deny that North Americans have an unhealthy addiction to sugar. Sugar is not addictive. Sugar's not addictive. Every time you're like, oh, sugar's bad for you. Well, are you sure it's the sugar that's bad for you, or is it the chemicals that are bad for you? Right? North Americans, like people all over the world. Ah, somebody is pounding on my door. Give me a second. Okay, so I am gonna have to jump off of here because I'm agitated and come back because somebody was supposed to call before they made a delivery and they didn't, and now anyhow, somebody pounded on my door. I gotta deal with some shit. I'll probably be back. I'll jump back on to finish. I'm so sorry. I'll jump back on to finish the next half an hour as soon as I'm done, probably about 30 minutes or so. Okay, bye. Videos together when I upload this. Welcome to my live herbal Q&A part 2, where I will wait to see if 300 people come back. Well, I won't wait that entire time. I'll wait to see if anybody gets a notification. So for those of you that are watching the replay, guy banged on my door, and I opened the door, and he instantly was like, "There's a 500-pound package at the bottom of your driveway." Now, for context, I live in a very rural area. So, and my driveway is like a quarter mile long. You can see my face. It's cold. I was out there in this dress and fucking sandals, talking with this guy. Um, I my bathtub broke like a month ago. Like I took a bath, I got out of the bathtub and I went to drain it, and like then my bathroom flooded, and I was like, fuck. So I ordered a new bathtub during Black Friday sale on Home Depot because it's on sale, right? And they were supposed to call before they make like semi freight deliveries, right? Because we live somewhere where there's no reception and we have to plan it. So this lady shows up to deliver the thing I ordered, but she can't drive her semi truck up my driveway. So she flags down a random man driving by and tells him to come bang on my door. uh, so no, this is the second half of the Q&A. I had to abruptly stop my last live because somebody pounded on my door like they were a cop. Um, and so I went down there in this dress and sandals and a little fucking cardigan. And I hopped on my tractor and I went down there and I took the delivery of the bathtub. But that's what I did. But it was crazy because, you know, I didn't expect to open my door to have like a man yelling at me about like taking delivery for something. And I was like, what the fuck? This is why you gotta call. This is why you gotta call before you make delivery. So, that is what happened, and that will make more sense to the people who are rewatching these videos once I splice them together to make it a Q&A. Yeah, that's why the dogs were barking. They were like, somebody's here, somebody's here, somebody's here. And I'm like, shut up, Charlie, you don't know anything. And I am so cold. It's like 30 degrees out here today. And I just slipped on my sandals and went down there because it's like, I hate when people like rush you so fast that you're like, I literally don't have time to like put on appropriate clothing to do this. So, anyhow, I answered about 2 pages of questions, or a page and a half of questions. I've made myself some tea here because you can see like how red my cheeks are and my toes are even red. I need to build my core temperature back up because I was just out there, and they had to have been perplexed, right? Because like that guy decided to just sit there and watch what happened, like, which is fucking weird. And I was like, he's like, all right, well, it's a 500-pound delivery. I'm like, that fucking bathtub don't weigh no 500 pounds. I specifically picked it out because I have to install it. I didn't get a cast iron tub. It weighs like 100 and something pounds, right? And I'm like, if you drop it on the road, I'll just use a tractor to push it through the gates because we have farm gates and stuff. And but they're always perplexed, like when I show up like in this dress and sandals on this fucking tractor. I'm like, drop it on the fucking road. Let's get this done. Okay. Okay. Um, let me jump back onto this, and then this will be, well, that timer's already gone off, so I guess I'll just start all over again. Let me jump back into this, and then I will say these Q&As. And then if I've answered all of these questions and my time isn't up, I will jump into here to answer stuff in the comment section. Uh, let me fucking center my brain with some tea right quick. I swear to God. I just, when shit happens, and of course it happens where I'm like, hey husband, while I'm doing this Q&A, why don't you and Temperance, our daughter, go pick out a fucking Christmas tree because we haven't got that up yet. And of course it happens when he's not here. But to be fair, he doesn't know how to drive the tractor. So I would have been out there anyways, but it would have been less jarring. But he would have gone down there and realized it wasn't that fucking heavy. Oh, warmth. Okay. Okay, so we were talking about Lewy body disease, but that was a whole fucking, I was in the flow when I started that one. So, this question is, and again, for those who are just joining, these questions were submitted on my community section on YouTube here, where people dropped a question, and then people like upvoted it with a like if they wanted to answer, things like that. So I went through that, and then I did a bunch of let people submit questions through Instagram as well. Um, Hello, April. Love your work and thank you for your knowledge. Okay, question. Is it safe to make magnesium oil with comfrey infusion? So that's question one, number one. Yeah. So remember, for those of you who have watched my magnesium oil video, magnesium oil isn't actually oil. It's just that you put so much magnesium in the water that it makes it feel oily, right? And you can use any herb base you want. You know that's safe to use, and comfrey would be a fantastic one, especially if you are trying to um, support like bone development. Now, a lot of people don't realize that magnesium is really crucial for getting calcium to where it needs, like, you need magnesium and calcium. Calcium, they're important cofactors, right? And you want the calcium to go to the correct place on your body, like in your bones, so it doesn't end up in your veins and things like that. Um, so, magnesium paired with comfrey to use topically would be really fantastic for supporting, like, uh, broken bones, sprains, anything like that, anything bone in nature, I would love that combination. And it's completely safe to use that. The second question is, with an alfalfa nourishing herbal infusion, they want to know if it's 1 ounce for 1 quart for 24 hours. Yeah, so you'd put 1 ounce of your alfalfa into your quart jar, which is 4 cups. Dogs are barking, and I'm like, oh god. um, and then you would pour boiling hot water over that, let it sit out until it's room temperature, and then pop it in the fridge and then strain the next day. Alfalfa infusion is really fantastic for anybody who needs to work on their vitamin K levels. She's really rich in vitamin K. She's fantastic for osteoarthritis, which is different than RA, which is rheumatoid arthritis. It's more like bone on bone and wear. I like her. I mean, look at horses. They really need alfalfa and they thrive on it. It keeps their joints healthy. It's really just fantastic for all of our well being. Okay, so the next question is, what will help with frequent urination at night after I fall asleep? It is really an issue. There can be a lot of causes for this, um, but you could try working with corn silk tea or capsules or tincture. Although tincture would probably be least effective, honestly. Corn silk is known for helping to slow down like urgency. It's fantastic for anybody if like your kids wet the bed and there's no emotional factor to it. You know, be mindful of that. And there's like if there's just really anything that's going on with the bladder, corn silk can likely help. Now, if you're a woman and you've given birth, um, I would consider, or even if you haven't given birth, looking into like pelvic exercises for like toning your pelvic region. It's not really anything that anybody would see the results of externally, but when we tone our pelvic, it what happens is sometimes the pelvis can like move forward and it just kind of like puts undue pressure on your bladder. And so sometimes if we work on toning that area, it can really help alleviate that urgency all the time. Now, if it's also happening during the day, if you find that you're having to pee constantly during the day, it could be that you have insulin resistance. It could be that your kidneys aren't happy. It could be that you're really lacking in electrolytes. When we don't have enough like salts and potassium and things in our body, it feels like we have to pee all the time. And here's a really interesting thing. If you are stressed out and your cortisol is just you're constantly living in this fight or flight mode or just anxiety or whatever, your body makes you go pee more often because it wants to get the cortisol out of it. So if you feel like you're peeing all the time, meaning there's not much coming out, those are some things that you could look into, but it could definitely be cortisol. But for nighttime, right off the bat, I would try corn silk to see if it makes a difference. Um, Best sleep aid to go to sleep and stay asleep. So I talked about this one actually in regards of how in the last live Q&A that got cut off. I talked about this one. I talked about this one. Okay, so somebody say somebody else was live, and I was like, brain was like, what does that mean for me? Nothing. Keep talking, April. Okay, so took a drink. I talked about this one in the last live when people asked about like adrenal issues and living in fight or flight and anxiety all the time. Well, if you can go to sleep fine, but you wake up your liver is saying, hey, I'm empty. So basically, human biology 101, everybody's the same, nobody's body is different. Says you eat food all day long, hopefully some of that's carbohydrates, and what your body is, it takes that glucose and your liver turns it into glycogen. And then your liver stores that glycogen, right? And so that's like your energy throughout the day, but mainly it's your energy at night. When you go to sleep, you are fasting. You aren't eating for like, 6 to 8 hours, right? And so what your body does is it slowly releases glycogen from your liver so you can keep your blood sugar stable as you sleep. But most people, when they run out between the hours of 2 to 3 a.m. And what happens is all of a sudden your liver says, oh fuck, we are out of sugar and this person's blood sugar is going to crash. And so what it does is it says, hey, let's pump out some cortisol, which is a stress hormone, but cortisol has the capacity to basically it's a stress hormone that depletes your muscle mass, and when it does that, it can steal glucose, glycogen from your muscles, right? From your organs, from your brain, from everywhere. And it does that to keep you from crashing, right? And so if you have the capacity, if you're eating enough carbohydrates and you're honest with yourself about it, like you get something like Chronometer and see like how much you're actually eating. If you try to eat like some ice cream before you go to bed, don't be afraid to eat before you go to bed. Like really work on incorporating more complex carbohydrates like root veggies, anything like that, fruit, things like that, and see if it helps you sleep better. And if you feel like, well, it's been a month or so, because it takes a while, right? If you feel like it's been a month or so, and it isn't helping, well, then your liver is probably telling you that it's having a hard time holding on the glycogen and it's not feeling great. And so then you could start working with something like, I mean, you could do it in the meantime. You could work with something like roasted dandelion root to help your liver function. You could step into the milk as like, oh, it's benign to hurt you, but it can make you feel like shit. You can have symptoms and things like that from it. So start really slow if you're going to work with milk thistle for the liver, but you might just need to support your liver more if you. And I know everybody wants to hear an herb to fall asleep, and of course you could use things like valerian or skullcap or lavender, all these things that can conk you over the head, but none of them, hear me, none of them will be able to override your biological function where when you run out of glycogen, you wake up because your cortisol levels go right. So we can't mask not having enough carbohydrates or glycogen in our liver with herbs. It's not great to do that. Okay, so next page. Taking a drink. My little Charlie dog is in there barking, and I'm like, who's here now? I hate that. Usually we have the gate shut. Usually we have the gate shut all the time and locked. Because my nervous system likes that. And it's not like people can't climb over a gate, but Um, but it's like holiday package delivery season, so we have to have the cows locked up and the gate shut and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so um, all right. So this person said aspirin, coffee, red wine can make me feel like I'm having a heart attack and doctors can't figure it out. Number one, get a new fucking doctor because it's so blatant that you're having histamine reactions that it's not even funny. When you have a histamine reaction, you might be treading into like the mast cell syndrome. When you eat things that release histamines, it can do all kinds of things, including make arrhythmia in your heart where that's beating too fast, anything over like 100 beats per minute. And it can also be careful because that can shift and you could end up having an anaphylactic reaction. Right, because some people, if it goes into mast cell completely, you can end up having anaphylaxis where you can't breathe and like you damn near die. And sometimes that's how people find out that they officially have mast cell syndrome. But you might just have a histamine intolerance. I would look into your copper levels. Uh, Low copper is like really suspect for anybody who's having histamine reactions, especially if you haven't had allergies your entire life and suddenly you just have all these histamine issues. But it's still worth looking into it even if you've had allergies your whole life. Now, there are herbs like chamomile. So chamomile would I write down I'm supposed to talk about to give my brain a break. I like chamomile for dealing with histamine reactions. It's dose dependent though. That means like a cup of chamomile tea might not do anything for you, but it might help the other person. So you might have to have a stronger brewed infusion. You might have to work on using it consistently throughout the day. You might not be able to use it if you know you have ragweed allergies. That's the catch 22. It's like it's not known as a histamine trigger. It actually helps reduce histamines, but if you have ragweed allergies, it might trigger it that way. But yeah, get a different doctor because if they can't figure out why something that's like wine, come on, that is like top number one histamines, right? Wine, and then coffee's really high in histamines, and it's worse if you're drinking regular coffee that's not like mold free certified because it releases histamines and aspirin. Um, I actually looked into that one. Aspirin, they say, can help people who have mast cell to an extent, but also it's been known to trigger people who just have histamine. So it's probably dependent on the body. Okay, so the next question is unclogging deeply clogged pores on the nose or under eyes. I would actually, I brought props for this. um, okay, so I've got props. So if you are dealing with like clogged pores, first of all, you could start doing like facial steaming just with normal water to really help that up. And then once your face is dry, you could start doing dry brushing. Now, I've only started to do this in like the past month, but I've really enjoyed it and really dived into like the benefits of it. And so that's where like you're stimulating your lymphatic pathways first, and then you're going this way, and then this way, and then this way. And basically, if you dry brush like this, it wouldn't happen overnight, but it has a capacity to get rid of those dead skin cells, sin cells. And then it has the capacity to stimulate blood flow, lymphatic function, open up, but also tighten your pores at the same time, right? And then consider after that starting to stopping using soap on your face. What's probably happening is you clean your face because you're afraid to get blackheads, but you wash all your sebum off, which is like your natural face oils, and then like bacteria can get in, and then it's like a vicious cycle. You could start using a face cream that has tallow in it to help replace and break that cycle. But I really think that dry brushing would be helpful. I would also say cupping, but it's on your nose and under your eyes, and that's a really gentle area, and the brushes are very soft. Right, so it's just like constant exfoliation daily with dry brushing would probably help, but it's not so abrasive. Like you wouldn't want to use like an exfoliating wash every day, right? That would be rough on your skin, but the dry brushing is fantastic. Okay, so I have warmed up. I'm feeling pretty better. Now it's only my toes that are cold. But it'll take a minute for my body to release the rest of my blood back into my face to let my color come back. Okay, so I am gonna pour another cup of tea here. Yeah, I've started doing dry brushing now, and then I also do the cupping like once every 3 days, and that's basically the same concept except for you have like where you have these little suction cups that you clamp on and pull back, but you need oil on your face to do it well. And it just helps with the lymphatic flow. And I know I have good skin, but I thought, well, I am pushing 40. If I start doing like muscle care and lymphatic care to my face, it would probably help me in the long run, right? Because I could go either way as I age, and either way is fine. But like on my mom's side of the family, my mom is like 72, almost 73, and she doesn't look it, not in the least. Like her skin, I mean, she has age appropriate wrinkles, but not really, you know. And then on my dad's side of the family, my grandmother on that side, it was like the typical like Irish. And I say that because like you know like the jowls and like deep wrinkles, and I know that it can be not just genetics and other factors and stuff, but I'm like, well, I don't know which lottery I'm gonna hit. So I just started doing the dry brushing and the cupping, and I find it really relaxing. And it has reduced some fine lines that I had showing up here, and you know that one in the center that's like, because I'm always squinting. It has helped. Um, okay, so let's see. Does eating or drinking after or before using a tincture impact the strength? No, not really, because even though you're swallowing it, a tincture, it's alcohol, so it's like permeable in your stomach, right? You are absorbing it, you're not necessarily digesting it. Now, if you were using capsules, yeah. So, like if you buy one of my tinctures and you take that and with your meal or without it or drinking water with it or whatever, it's not going to impact it. But if you were to buy like my Synergism capsules and like you ate a meal first and then you took that capsule, it doesn't make it less effective. It just means it doesn't hit your system as fast. But it depends on what you're wanting to use it for. Now, if you are wanting to use a tincture for like anxiety or like something that you need a fast reaction of, you would put it under your tongue and count to 30, even though I know it'll burn a little bit because it's alcohol, because you're going to be absorbing it sublingually anyways. That means you want to bypass your gut and get it to go directly into your bloodstream. And the fastest way to do that on any part of your body is directly under your tongue. It's why a lot of like heart medications or things like that that need to be fast acting are supposed to be put under the tongue. Um, but if you're just using a tincture for like digestive support or just daily maintenance and you don't need it to like calm down a panic attack or something, it won't impact it if you have it with food or water. Okay, so this person wants to know what herbs to increase nitric oxide levels. You can do things like garlic, pomegranate, any leafy green, anything that has natural nitrates in it. But honestly, I'm all about lowering my NO levels. Now, I know that sounds crazy because we need nitric oxide, obviously. But we live in a world where nitrates are in everything we eat. Even if you're not eating overly processed, they're still hard to avoid. And increased NO, nitric oxide levels, has been linked to oxidative stress, DNA damage, hair loss, all kinds of stuff like that. So I like to work in the opposite realms unless I have like prove to myself that somehow my NO levels are like dangerously low. But also, the thing to know about nitric oxide is your body has the capacity to produce it on its own from certain amino acids, and it competes with areas in your brain that also create GABA as well as dopamine. So if you have really high nitric oxide level, the way it works is it'll be high and it'll push down your dopamine and your happy receptors, right? Like most people, like if you look into it, like high nitric oxide levels can be like linked to depression and things like that. And it's not that the NO itself is bad, it's that if it's too high, things like dopamine and GABA are too low. But yeah, if you're eating enough like leafy greens and stuff, you probably have fine nitric oxide level. Okay, so, hi April. I heard that ascorbic acid is manufactured GMO. That's correct. It's not just manufactured GMO, it's basically, for all intents and purposes, black mold that's grown on GMO corn, and they call it vitamin C, but it's actually ascorbic acid, and it has no copper component to it. So, vitamin C in nature, when you eat an orange, like just eat an orange, it's think of it like an egg. The vitamin C is the shell, and the yolk is copper, right? So your body can utilize that. And when you eat ascorbic acid, think of it like an egg that is creepy as shit and has nothing on the inside of it. So what happens is, as you eat basically mold that you're calling vitamin C, your body can't process it unless it has enough copper. And because our diets are woefully depleted from copper these days, because we don't eat organ meats and most people don't eat a lot of seafood and things like that, on our soils are depleted in copper and all that kind of stuff, it starts robbing it from your liver and other parts of your body, and you become copper deficient. I try really hard to avoid ascorbic acid beyond the fact that it's GMO and made from mold. It's just the fact that it depletes your body of copper, and you really need copper fun fact, if you're constantly anemic and you can never get your iron levels up, you probably are depleted in copper because you need copper to shuttle iron into your blood, right? Like you can't remember we're not a vehicle. Every part of our body and everything that we need food wise is interconnected. And when we start playing God and we say we're going to make our own vitamin C from mold and fucking corn that doesn't have any copper in it, well, we didn't get it right because we aren't nature. And so we take it and it depletes us of copper. And then we're like, oh, I'm iron deficient. We're like, we'll take more iron, but too much iron depletes your copper even more. And then, and so it comes back to like, um, whole food when we can, and if we're able, and understanding like if we do have to supplement, like being like, okay, what are the cofactors that go along with this supplement? Like if I'm taking B12, I need to make sure that I'm eating enough potassium, right? If I'm working with iron, am I sure my copper levels aren't low? If my vitamin D3 is low, do I even have enough magnesium in my body to synthesize it from the cholesterol that I'm eating? Okay, so and then that actually kind of goes into another question that is similar to that. Somebody said vitamin C content left in teas or cooked syrups versus preparations that have it intact. How to not destroy. So yeah, vitamin C, I don't like the word destroyed because it's not like the vitamin C like goes away. It's just degraded, and you're not going to be able to completely avoid that. One thing that's a good example is rose hips. They have more vitamin C in just a few little hips than an entire orange does, right? Rose hips are amazing, but they're also really tough. And so, but then people are afraid to kill the vitamin C. So they maybe simmer some rose hips for like 5 or 10 minutes and then they drink it. Well, I hope it tastes good because it has very little vitamin C available in it. Because the cellular structure of the rose hips are so tough, you have to at least simmer it for 25, if not 30 minutes on low to make that cellular structure of the plant break open. Break open so the vitamin C can even come out of it. Think of it, and I think it was in my tea book I talked about it. I've talked about it before. Imagine a potato. Imagine a raw, big, russet potato. If you threw that potato at somebody, you would knock them the fuck out. Right? Because it's hard. It's something that you could really knock a person out with potato if you threw it hard enough. It's hard, it would hurt, right? But what happens when you cook that potato? If you threw that at somebody, it would just be like a splat to their face and they'd be like, what are you doing? So the difference is the cooked potato has its rigid cellular structure intact. I mean, the uncooked potato has the rigid cellular structure intact, and the cooked potato is mashed and goop and would just make a mess, and it wouldn't really hurt anybody besides their feelings if you threw it at them because the cellular structure has been broke down. All plants have a rigid cellular structure. That's why it's easier to digest well cooked vegetables than it is raw vegetables because we don't ferment things in our gut, right? And so when it comes down to the vitamin C content, I would rather take a little bit of loss in content, knowing that I am getting more than I would if I didn't cook it long enough. Um, but you can also do things like the nourishing herbal infusion way, where you're like pouring the hot water over it, but then leaving it there overnight as it so you're pouring boiling water over it, but then it's slowly degrading those cells as it sits. And you can do it that way too, depending on what herb you're working with. If you were super worried about the vitamin C content being completely destroyed, that'd be a good option too. Okay, so this person said daily headaches, migraines. Husband has been suffering forever and I can't seem to pinpoint the trigger. Headaches are hard because they can be caused from so many things. Oh, somebody said sorry for irritating me lately. Earlier, I don't think anybody irritated me. I don't recall feeling irritated. um, but so headaches are hard because it's hard to pinpoint the cause. It could be from a B12 deficiency. It could be from a folate deficiency. It could be from exposure to black mold. It could be because he's estrogen dominant. It could be because he's dehydrated. It could be because he doesn't have enough iron or copper in his body. It could be from sky high serotonin or cortisol levels. Like, right? It could be from a neck issue. right? So the first thing I would do is get like, you might have to go to, it's walk-in labs online and pick like the most comprehensive vitamin and mineral and micronutrient panel you can get done, and go get that blood work done, because and now labs aren't perfect, and sometimes things aren't looked at correctly on labs, or it's a snapshot, or it needs to be measured in a different way. But really looking at all of the nutrients, not the basic shit that doctors look at. I'm not saying that looking at your vitamin D or magnesium levels isn't great, but like if they aren't looking at everything in conjunction, if you aren't looking at your active B12 levels, it's really hard to tell. But also getting your home tested for black mold, especially if you've been living in the same place, right? Anybody else is dealing with fatigue or tiredness all the time, or just kind of feeling ran down no matter what you do. Remember, with black mold, it doesn't have to. People assume a moldy house would look like all old and ran down. It could be like something as simple like there's a tiny leak under a bathtub or a shower that you don't know about, that is like feeding mold on a piece of wood, and it could be such a small leak that it doesn't even show up on like your walls or anything like that. It could be like a drop every like 2 hours, right? Um, but getting that mold test done would be a good step to take too. But also, here's the really insidious thing about mold: it depletes minerals rapidly, especially B12, because B12, one of the things it does in your body is it binds itself to toxins, so you can pee them out, right? That's why they use it to save people from cyanide poisoning. Like if you somehow end up poisoned by cyanide and you go to the hospital, they're going to hook you up with an IV bag that's nothing but B12, because the B12 in huge amounts goes into your body, and the cyanide bonds to the B12 and you pee it out and it saves you. Well, if you're constantly exposed to mold, it's constantly binding to those endotoxins and you're peeing out all your B12s. It's saving you, but eventually you end up depleted in it. And remember that you can only get B12 naturally from meat. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you at me in the comment section. The only bioavailable B12 is found by eating meat. Of course, you can take B12 shots. B12 supplements aren't very effective unless you get the sublingual ones that go into your tongue. And even then, it's shown that only about 2% of that goes into your bloodstream. If you take a shot in your leg or on the back of here, it bypasses your gut, goes directly into your tissues. Okay, so why dandelion root needs roasting and not other roots? Remember how I talked about the potato? How it's really hard? Well, the only reason that we really roast dandelion, beyond the fact that it really makes it taste really just so much better, it makes it like more like nutty and earthier and almost like coffee chocolate undertones. It's fantastic. So that's definitely probably a primary reason. But if you think about it, how many of these other roots are you trying to make a drink out of on a regular basis, right? Like nobody's like, I'm gonna brew up some bitter ass Teasel, right? And so when you roast the dried dandelion roots, what it does is it helps break down that cellular structure, because cooking is cooking is cooking. The point is to break down that cellular structure. So when you do make your roasted dandelion root tea, um, when you do make your roasted dandelion root tea, it really, really helps it be more available in your cup, if that makes sense. You can use normal dandelion root tea. I guarantee you'll probably go back to the roasted for flavor wise, But if you do use the unroasted, I would simmer it for quite a while longer. Okay, so how can I, as a new herbalist, prevent botulism? This really scares me, is the next question. Um, so there's so much fear about botulism that's unfounded. First of all, botulism exists everywhere. It's on the food you eat, it's on the drinks you make, it's everywhere. It's on your skin, it's in your home. Don't freak out. It's when it blooms that it makes you sick. And typically it needs a non-acidic environment, which is why we have to pressure can things like meat or vegetables if we're canning, and why we can water bath things that are like acidic or sugary, which is actually kind of a type of acid, right? You don't have to worry about pressure canning jams or jellies, right? Because they have no sugar in it. Botulism can't grow. When it comes to oils, um, if you're using completely dried herbs, you have zero risk of botulism growing in your oil. It can't. It needs the water. That's the reason why in all of my videos, like, unless I absolutely have no choice but to use a freshly wilted plant in making an oil infusion, I only use dried plant matter, full stop. I have like a 2 hour long live class on making uh, herbal infused oils where I talk all about the whys. I also have a book all about it and my Common Ways for Common People series, and I talk about all that type of stuff. But you don't have to worry about botulism in tinctures. It can't grow in alcohol. You don't have to worry about botulism in honey, even though it has a shit ton of botulism spores in it, which is why you can't give it to little ones, so they say. But it can't grow because there's so much sugar there, right? And there won't be botulism in your balms or your salves. And if you're making water-based creams or gels, you need to be making using a real ass preservative. Essential oils in a preservative, vitamin E is in a preservative, grape seed or grapefruit extract is in a preservative. You need to use a real preservative. Like, don't fuck around and give somebody like a skin eating disease or yourself or your loved ones. I like liquid Germall Plus. That's what I use. I really like it. It's broad spectrum. It covers bacteria, yeast, and fungus, and you use it at a really small amount, and it's paraben free. And it doesn't split formulas. Let me tell you, over the years of working with different preservatives, one that doesn't fuck up your formula is worth its weight in gold. Um, okay, so somebody asked, they're looking for support with Epstein-Barr virus ever since mono 3 years ago, no energy, and they're sick all the time. So most people already have Epstein-Barr virus. It's like 98% of the human population has it, and a lot of it you didn't have to get mono to even have it. So the fact that you came down with mono, you were like one of the very few people who didn't have it, or it activated for the first time in you in earnest, right? Um, it's really opportunistic. EBV doesn't really show up unless your immune system like is already worn down. It kind of just hides out like other herpes virus because it's in the herpes family, and it waits until you're worn down enough that it can be like, hey, yeah, I'm just walking through this open door. Things that I really like to support EBV with are the same things that I like to support shingles with or herpes with. Definitely glycine. Glycine supplement all day long. You could also work with like grass-fed beef gelatin to get the whole amino acid profile. But glycine is really fantastic for helping combat EBV as well as like cold sore outbreak, herpes, shingles, all that type of stuff. My husband has enteric shingles, which means he gets shingles on the inside of his body, which is fucking deadly. And it's one of the top things. If I keep him on top of taking it, you know how that goes. It doesn't happen as often, and if he has an outbreak, which is more like he has to know what's going on internally, it really helps. But also self heal herb. I have a video on self heal. I used to tell people St. John's wort, but she's really good at repressing herpes related viruses. I love her for that. Topically, all day long, I'm using her for shingles or herpes or things like that. Internally, so many people are on medications that it's hard to say to use St. John's wort. But also, I do not like, in the past couple of years, I don't like how much she stimulates serotonin production. A lot of people are like, oh, awesome, serotonin helps with depression. Well, even the industry is admitting that it doesn't. It actually can cause depression. The pills they give you make you produce so much serotonin that your serotonin receptors shut down, which is why you feel like numb and lifeless and have no sex drive. And it's okay if those things help you and you need them, but that is what's happening in your body. So I don't like to use St. John's wort internally all that much anymore because of that. But self heal, on the other hand, just listen to her name. Like, you can just Google self heal herb and it'll pop up all these studies, everything. She's really fantastic for supporting immune system, and I like her capacity to repress the Epstein-Barr virus and other things like that, and the herpes family. I love that. Now, you could also cycle through with lemon balm. You could work with self heal for a week and then lemon balm for a week. Lemon balm is pretty good at also repressing these types of viruses. Uh, but with lemon balm, you don't want to use her constantly all the time because she can repress thyroid function. So this person said my name in a bright red color. This says, can you make a video on the proper way to use a preservative in a lotion or something simple? I'm tired of videos that use vitamin E and other natural things. Yeah, I plan on pretty soon, well, not, well, midwinter, mid to late winter, I'm going to do a class on how to make creams. But the preservative that you'll use, that you choose to use, it will have a percentage use, right? So like I use liquid Germall Plus. Depending on my formula, I typically use like 1%, like 0.5 to 1%. So you would take all of the weight of your ingredients that you're going to be adding and you add it all together, and then take Google and say what is 0.5% of, the number you put in, and it'll say it's like, oh, 34 grams, or 34, and then you would know that was grams, and then that's how much you add. Typically, depending on the formula, depending on the preservative, but you usually have to add it in the cool down phase, meaning when you guys see my mixers going and that's all cool and it's like ready to be put in, I'm like, okay, it's under 119 degrees, now I can add the preservative, and then I mix it for like another 10 minutes so it's in there, right? But it's not as complicated as people make it seem. They're just afraid to use preservatives, which they shouldn't be. I mean, maybe don't buy like the nastiest type available to make something last 20 years, but also you should be just as afraid as like the fact that within a day or more, bacteria can start to colonize your water-based cream, because water and oil make a bacterial explosion. Okay, so let's see. What do you give children for fevers? My top picks for fevers for kids or even for adults: Pearly Everlasting, Linden Bloom, and Violet Leaf. These are all really gentle. They've been used with kids for a really long time. You can make them into teas. They won't taste bad at all as a tea. You can make them as a tincture. If you're going to give them to like any kid under 5, I would put it in warm water and allow the alcohol to evaporate off for like 35-40 minutes and then let them drink it. Um, but they work really well, and they're also, as a benefit, all pretty good for supporting lung function and things like that, respiratory issues. They're antiviral, antibacterial, so they are a pretty good choice. Um, so this person said, mouth and teeth care. I struggle with this and hate all the lies in the mainstream care. I use my mouth mud. Shameless plug. But I really like working with mineral based stuff, which is, why my mouth mud is the way it is. But um, I like xylitol for oral health. I don't like xylitol for eating, just in a small amount. It's one of the things that is in my mouth mud. I love that it starves the bacteria on your teeth. I also really love Yarrow tincture. I add that to my toothbrush with my mouth mud. You could also do a Yarrow tea and just use it as like a gargle rinse. In fact, if you've got like some infection going on and you can't, you're having to wait to get to the doctor, or you've got like a painful tooth, or you had a tooth pulled, all day long I would make Yarrow tea. Don't brew it longer than 8 to 10 minutes because she's got a lot of volatile compounds to her and you don't want to overbrew it. And then you add some salt to that, right? Like a salt water rinse, and you rinse. As a person who's had a lot of teeth pulled out on my head because I only, I was poor and only had OHP, so they just pull teeth, they don't fix them. um, that saved me and healed me a lot. No dry socket, no nothing like that. Now, um, I just went to the dentist the other day because I was eating breakfast and like a piece of the back of this tooth just like chipped off, and it's not bad, but I like to get the chips taken care of so it doesn't deteriorate further. And it'd been about a year and a half since I'd been in for a cleaning. But within that year and a half, like all I use is my mouth mud and my Yarrow tincture, and she maybe spent 5 minutes on my cleaning, and it wasn't like there was nothing under my gums growing. There was nothing. She was like, yeah, this is pretty good for going on, a year and a half, almost 2 years of not having a cleaning. And I hate to floss. I use a water pick, but, it doesn't stimulate the gum growth the same way. But yeah, um, I don't know, there's holistic dentists. I don't have any around me. That would be neat. I see a lot of people are like, oh, I got a tooth pulled, so I didn't have a filling anymore. I'm like, I didn't have any teeth left. Because when you're homeless, when I was homeless, you know, you don't really have access to even somewhere to brush your teeth or anything like that. And then for years, I was super depressed because I was coming off of benzos and like, I just, but you know, what's crazy? I had, because OHP, they're fast to pull. They won't do crowns. They won't do anything to fix a tooth, right? And so, I had a cavity in like back teeth, right? Because even no matter how well you take care, it's hard back there because they're so far back. And they were like, well, we can pull it. And I'm like, okay. And I remember like 3 or 4 months later, I felt something sharp back there. And sometimes when they pull a tooth, a fragment will come out later, right? And I thought that's what it was. And I was like, well, that'll come out, right? And then like 3 weeks later, I stuck my tongue back there just randomly to see if that fragment was still there because it's like the very last molar, right? You don't stick your tongue back there very often. And there was a whole tooth. My fucking wisdom tooth came in perfectly, pain free. So I pretended like these little cavities that I had in these other three were horrendous, and you know the OHP dentist that sees like 80 people a day doesn't give a fuck. So I got him to pull out all three of those molars, and within 6 months, I had four brand new teeth. So I have all my wisdom teeth, and they came in perfectly. And in fact, my new dentist didn't believe me. You know, once I well, I did have insurance. I dropped it because it's too expensive now. But I mean, he was like, "What? This isn't the case." I'm like, "Yeah, look, get the X-rays." And he's like, "No shit, that was your wisdom teeth." And I'm like, "Yep, my wisdom teeth came in," and and so I'm like, "I got four free teeth." Okay, okay. Let's see. Is it safe to mix multiple tinctures together, especially ones that you take long term? Yeah, as long as you, this is what I always tell people when they're talking about herbs they're working with in any way. Get to know how that one herb makes you feel first. Give it like 3 to 5 days of working with something. Even with my Synergism capsules, which are two herbs in one, take that one capsule, right? Take that one thing by itself first. Then add, after you've taken the other one for a couple of days by itself, then add them together. Sometimes you'll find that each of those herbs works really well for you and you feel great, but when you take them together, it will either make you feel not great or it might make things even better. And then you can start adding them together. Although I always say with tinctures, you'll never catch me making a multiple formula tincture. If I need to take something like cleavers alongside of calendula, I just squirt my dose in a little bit of water and drink them both at the same time. But I don't mix them together because let's say you have all these herbs that are helping you, but something changes in your body and it's all mixed together and now you can't remove one. Right? What if you have to like be on a diuretic or something like that, and now you need to not be taking cleavers, but you can't take this whole blend you've made because it has cleavers in it, right? So it's better to join them together outside of the bottle, but you can use them together daily. And you know, as far as long term goes, I consider tinctures a microdose. Most of them are safe to take daily, but your body would always be happy for a little bit of a break. Just pay attention to how your individual body is reacting. Okay, this question just says Teasel, please. But I'm not talking a lot about Teasel. Teasel is in the thistle family, and she is really somebody said lysine or glycine for EBV, potato. But I like glycine, you know, but you can get L-lysine too. It just depends on how it's been extracted. But you could also just use grass-fed beef gelatin. Right, my brain was like, "What is that word?" Because it has all the amino acids in it. I would just be eating it daily. But Teasel's a potent one, right? Like there are some herbs that I need to make a video on, but sometimes I hesitate to make a video on because I don't want anybody to hurt themselves. So when it comes to Teasel, she's really pretty potent. She's really pretty potent at being able to chase like bacterial type infections out of our joints, right? A lot of people like to use it for limes. Um, but you really need to start very slow. I'm talking like one drop a day for like a week, and then 2 drops a day for a week, and then work your way up because a lot of people hurt themselves. They'll start too hard and too fast, and some random herbalist will just say take 15 drops. And then you go through this horrible like Herkimer type die-off reaction and you feel like you have the fucking flu and your body's all shaky and cold and you feel horrible, or worse, it flares up something like a, like a Lyme's episode or whatever's going on. So you just have to be really gentle with Teasel. What's funny is so many people are like, oh, she's rare and hard to find. I'm like, I cannot get. She's everywhere. She's problematic. Oh, what's that? Teasel, 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 Teasel. Ah, Teasel stabbed me because she's really pokey when you walk past. So I do like Teasel. I do think she has a time and place, but um, you have to work with Teasel very slowly. Start slow and work your way up. Pay attention to your body. And I would not work with Teasel unless I was also working on my lymphatic system, like doing a rebound daily or dry brushing or some sort of contact massage or working, with like cleavers or calendula or, anything that's going to stimulate your lymphatic system, because when you flush bacteria out of somewhere, if your system that gets rid of it isn't up to par, you'll feel worse. It doesn't really go anywhere. You could also consider working with like something that binds endotoxins, and there are herbs that do that in your gut. But actually, I had talked about the sarsaparilla would be a good one because she has the capacity to bind endotoxins in your blood, which is probably more along the lines of where Teasel would kick the bacteria into, because it's more paying attention to what's going on in like your joints and stuff than it is your gut. So somebody asked if I can riff about hibiscus. I get such cravings for it and I devour a quart of tea a day. First of all, listen to your body. If you're ever like, once you've introduced an herb and you're craving that herb, your body isn't wrong. It's telling you that it needs it in some way. And 99% of the time, I would bet my last bottom dollar that if you investigated a nutrient or an action that it had on your body, you would have something going on in your body that it helps with. Your body does not make mistakes when it craves things. When people are like, oh, I crave sugar all the time, I need more protein. I'm like, no, it's telling that you need more carbohydrates. If you're craving meat, you need more protein. Right, but like the thing is, it can only crave off of a basis that we've given it. If we only ever give it fucking candy bars and corn syrup, that's what it craves. But if we're eating like sweet potatoes and butternut squash, it's like, yeah, carbohydrates, give me that, right? So the thing is, you start drinking hibiscus and you start craving it. It's telling you maybe you have high blood pressure. Maybe you're low on vitamin C. Maybe your gut is needing more tannins. Maybe you've got H. pylori in your gut. But I'd be more inclined to believe that it's probably something to do with blood pressure related. Hibiscus is really, really well known for supporting blood pressure, to the point that there are ample studies where they show that within 10 days of simply drinking, um, or 7 to 10 days of simply drinking a cup of hibiscus a day, people's blood pressure lowered by 10 points. That's a big deal if you have high blood pressure. Lowering your blood pressure by 10 points is no joke. And that was just within the, first week or so of the study. If they would have done long term, I mean, so pay attention to that. The only people that I would say shouldn't be drinking hibiscus is if they have chronically low blood pressure, right? Because you don't want to, and that's a good thing to say. Like, you're like, oh, how do I know if I can take this herb? Well, does it directly counteract something that's like good for you or bad for you? Like, if you have low blood pressure, stay away from herbs that lower your blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure, gravitate the ones that lower blood pressure. But also, when it comes to medications, the best way to know a contradiction is to say, does this herb do the same thing as my medicine? Right? If I'm taking a medication for low blood pressure or for high blood pressure, and then I also drink an herb that helps with high blood pressure, well, my blood pressure might get too low. Right? So just kind of think of it that way, because there are millions of meds out there, and of course you can look into it, but really just look at their actions. If the medicine and the herb you're using has a similar action, and if that action got too big, it would be a problem. They probably shouldn't be taken. Um, that's my hour mark, but I have more pages to go through, and I'm committed, especially because I took like a 30-minute break to tractor in the cold. um, okay, another cup of tea. I love this cast iron teapot so much. It's still so warm, and I can put it on top of my wood stove and re-warm it. But it's like, oh, it's so warm because I'm still a little cold, you know. Um, but I was really worried when I bought a cast iron teapot because I was honest with myself. I'm like, am I going to take care of this? Like, I have cast iron pans, a lot of them. I primarily cook in cast iron, but I know that pans are more forgiving because I can, scrub it. But with a teapot, I can't oil the inside of it, so it's like I only use it for like green and white teas. And so I just flip it upside down afterwards, and eventually there becomes this like beautiful sheen on the inside from the tannins from the tea. And so I'm like, will I take care of it? Will I make it rust? Will I forget the tea in it one day? Right, because I'm a human and I haven't yet, and I'm proud of myself. But I think I have tea every day, and it's like a ritual. Um, okay, so y'all should probably be pretty happy about it because I came in here and I'm drinking caffeine, very limited amount. Okay, so where was I? I talked about hibiscus. Can anything be synergistic with mullein to help clear the lungs? Yeah, and I talked about this a bit in the first Q&A before I got interrupted. Um, Mullein is really fantastic for like thinning out phlegm so you can hack that nasty shit up. But I also really like thyme would be a good combination and one that's an easy herb to access for people. You can even get it fresh from the store to make a thyme tincture. There's my thyme onion tea. Onion would be good if you're dealing with something bacterial because onion has a lot of sulfur compounds in her, and those sulfur compounds like just like to kill bacteria like on contact. That's why I have that like thyme onion tea video. Another one would be reishi mushroom. She has a good affinity for the lungs, including the entire body. And of course, earlier I talked about the tiger's milk mushroom. But, and I'll say it again, and I said it in the last video, mullein really pairs well with whole milk. If you're looking to support your lungs and you're not lactose intolerant, if you can get a hold of raw milk, right? Like me, mullein, and my goat milk all day long, right? And just really, really soothing to the throat. Um, so, simple tips to maximize high nutrition herb diet, low amount of available prep and cook time. So they want to know how they can get the most nutrition by doing the least effort. Nourishing herbal infusions. Full stop. Because all you're going to do is boil some water, dump it over some herbs, let it sit, strain it, drink it. I mean, it takes about 18 to 24 hours of letting it sit, but it's literally like 5 minutes of hands-on time to do it, maybe 10. If you got kids getting in your way and shit. um, that would definitely be it. And then of course, people don't think about like spices in the kitchen as herbs. Why not? Rosemary's a mint, thyme's a mint, garden sage is a mint. And so really learning about the herbs that you do cook with and adding them to. When I'm making soup, I'll toss in like a turkey tail mushroom, just a single one, like a bay leaf. If I'm making something that's a little stronger tasting, I might add in a single slice of astragalus root. That one has a strong taste though, so make sure it's not something that's like really delicate flavored unless you like her like earthy kind of bitter flavor. But probably nourishing herbal infusions would be your best bet, and rotating through the different ones. I have a whole like hour and a half or 2 hour long recorded class on that as well. Okay, so where do I start if I want to get out of this depression hole? I gotta go slow. I need one herb to befriend. Ginkgo biloba. I would start with ginkgo because she increases your dopamine levels, and I would get a red light for red light therapy, especially if you can't get out into the morning sun within like a half an hour of waking up. Before you look at your screens or anything else that blows that glows blue on your face, get that red light in your eyes. It can really, really help. Um, but I like ginkgo. I like ginkgo because she increases your dopamine levels really well. And then when you're ready to work with a second herb, I would pair her with California poppy because she increases your GABA levels. And they work together really well synergistically. Um, what kind of herbs are good for random dizzy spells? Is it possible from long C? I want you to go get your vitamin B12 and folates checked. We know that the C word is depleting people of B12 when we were already really depleted from stress and all other kinds of things, mold exposure, lack of eating enough red meat, or things like that. And one of the primary symptoms of B12 deficiency is vertigo. If you're dealing with vertigo, like not everybody who has a B12 deficiency gets vertigo. There are thousands of symptoms that you can get from a B12 deficiency. It's hard to nail down for some people, but vertigo is a pretty classic one. And there's not really an herb that will bandage that, and you wouldn't want to. You'd want to find the root cause. I would get like an active B12 test, not one. So, okay, when they take blood out of your arm and they do a serum level for B12, they're just looking at total B12. They're just looking at what's in there, but only part of that is active. So if they say, "Oh, you got a 280, you're fine." Well, fuck you. Half of that could be inactive and you could be like really depleted. Most people start to be symptomatic anything under 400 on a blood test. But also, here's the catch. If you have pernicious anemia, which is an autoimmune thing in your gut where you don't absorb B12 really well, you can have really, really, really high B12 levels, and they're like, "Oh, you have high levels. That's bad." But what it actually means is that you need B12 shots because your body isn't absorbing the B12 from your gut, so it just fucking perpetually streams through your bloodstream. So, but I would look into that for vertigo. I really would. And if it's not that, I would side eye magnesium next. Definitely. Okay. This there are two questions here that are kind of not herb related but interesting. Okay. Oh, and just to say, for anybody who I know you get tired of hearing me talk about B12, but I would get the book called "Could It Be B12?" and you can get it used on Amazon for like $4. And it is worth a read. It's a little dry, but man, yeah, I think that it's a type of book that doctors should be required to read because they miss it. They have like less than like 2 hours of training on B vitamins. Like they just miss it. Okay, so this person said, if I wanted to create a product, do you offer a one-on-one training or consult? Do you do formulation consultations? Never thought about doing that, but I could formulate the hell out of something for somebody. Um, I will say that probably in the next 3 months, I will start offering like very accessible one-on-one consultation for things. I never thought about offering it for formulation, but I suppose I could do that. But I have to get set up for it, and I want to make sure that I do it in a way that everything is still accessible to people, like these free Q&As and things like that. And then the next question that's somewhat related, they just said, your equipment. What did you start out with? What are you using now? Well, I started out with nothing but my hands. I used my body like a machine for years. I like to fill tincture bottles. Well, to fill tincture bottles, I always use the. I live around rural areas, so I can go to like the livestock store and buy those like big syringes that don't have a needle but a plastic tip, and they come sterilized. And I use those because they're food grade, right? I use those to pull up the tincture and put it into my bottles. I believe I show that on my Let's Talk All About Tinctures video. And it'll save you so much spilling and time, and it's a great way to do it. And then eventually I got this little handheld tincture machine where you put it in there and I stepped on a thing and it would fill it. And then there was one where you pumped it, and eventually I just grew. Right now, I have custom made machines for tincture filling. A lot of you, if you follow me on Instagram, have probably seen it in my stories where I'm like filling like 80 bottles at a time. And it's a tabletop, so it's not like some huge thing. And then, but I also use that. I use it to fill everything now, pretty much. But I outgrow things really quickly. So my advice is, if you can afford it, buy something that you can grow into. If you have the money to buy a piece of equipment that you're like, oh, I don't know if I need that, I'm not making that much right now, do it. Because eventually it's better to grow into something than out of something, even from a financial business perspective, right? Like when I finally switched up and got like a labeling machine and like a real wraparound labeling machine, like everything went Because suddenly it went from like, this is really hard and it takes me all day to label like, you know, 800 things by hand and we're exhausted and our back hurts, to I just labeled like 800 bottles in like 25 minutes, just sitting here feeding it into a machine, right? It makes a big difference. Right now, I'm working on getting a lot of outside help within the US. And my goal is hopefully within the next 6 months to a year to be like just overseeing everything. They're my formulas. It's my, my production, my this, my that. But like, I'm not having to use my body as a machine. And don't ever let anybody make you feel bad about growing to the point of needing help. There's this really weird thing in the herbalism world and beyond, where like we're like support small businesses unless they fucking grow. Like, how dare you grow enough that you're successful? What the fuck is wrong with you? I swear to God, it's crazy. Um, Okay, so pregnancy support at an elder age and postnatal recovery with a likely C-section. It's so crazy. Anybody over the age of like 30 is called an elder when they're like pregnant. And that just, it's so insulting. It really is, because obviously we're fertile well past our 30s, but I would Google Sally Fallon and her books. And I don't remember the name of it, but there's one very specific for pregnancy. And it's not really herbs, it's more about nutrition, because you can't herb your way through the vast amounts of nutrition that you will need during pregnancy. And all of that is like deeper related to like the Weston Price Foundation. Like, and they've seen pretty amazing results, and that book has been around a long time. Um, I would say the same thing going past pregnancy. And I believe that book talks about like diet during pregnancy and then like after, and then like feeding your baby. And it's pretty great. It's like really based on like whole foods, like healthy animal fats, none of this like shaming diet fear stuff. And if I was going to have another baby, youngest one will be 18 in like a year and a half. um, that's definitely what I would follow, as well as nettle nourishing herbal infusion. Probably the oat straw as well. Make sure it's organic so it's not full of glycosides. Um, but those are the things that I would do. And then you could also use a calendula infused oil, like an avocado oil or even a castor oil, to help with the scarring after your C-section. You can even use calendula infused oil, or even add some chamomile on your belly as it grows if you're not already really big, to help the skin stretch, which would just help cosmetically with having less stretch marks. Okay, let's see. What remedies, herbs, lifestyle changes help to combat hair loss in a 28-year-old male? You probably have really high prolactin levels. High prolactin and hair loss are like peanut butter and jelly. And that comes from like lower thyroid levels. And that comes from eating rancid seed oils, which are PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids. You probably have estrogen dominance and low testosterone. They did a study a while back. There was something called, it's like we are not our grandfathers. Where like 2, 3 generations ago, an 80-year-old man has higher testosterone levels than men in their 20s right now. And you know why? It's because they put fucking soy in everything we eat. And so it makes us estrogen dominant. And that's even hard on women. We don't need this much estrogen, and it causes all kinds of issues like balding, erectile dysfunction. It can cause things in women like PCOS or endo. It can cause, premature aging. It can cause premature menopause, fertility issues, painful periods. Like, seriously, just look into estrogen dominance. But also, you probably need more carbohydrates, because when your body is stressed out and doesn't get the carbohydrates it needs, then your thyroid and your metabolism level crash. And remember that your metabolism isn't just why you're skinny or thick. That's not really what it is. The mainstream media makes you think that, because they're like, increase your metabolism to lose weight, but like your metabolism is like your entire endocrine center. Like, it does so much more. It's like how you are alive. It's running all of your organs and depicting your energy levels and like your vitality. And so when we eat rancid seed oils and then not enough carbohydrates, we crash our metabolism, right? And lack of eating also crashes the metabolism. You could also look into pine pollen. for supporting those androgen levels to get your testosterone a little bit up. Because remember, when estrogen climbs, everything else gets pushed down, including your progesterone and testosterone levels. And then lastly, I would check out the book. It's called Hair Like a Fox by Danny Roddy. He's all over YouTube. He, talks a lot about the work of Dr. Raymond P. Learning about metabolism and all this type of stuff, and the dangers of like rancid seed oils. I would definitely look into his work, but Danny Roddy wrote a book specifically because he like went bald, like lost a lot of his hair when he was in his 20s, right? And he was able to grow a full head of hair back. And the book talks about all the things he did in the studies, and a lot of it's similar to what I've touched on. Okay, so how to minimize scarring on a cut. Calendula, 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 and some calendula. But you've got to be patient. Happens every day. I sell a calendula scar serum in my shop, but somebody will buy it, they'll use it for a week and be like, this didn't work. Oh my god damn it. You have to use it. You have to religiously use it. Put it by your bed at night or every morning, whatever. Every single day, you have to put that calendula serum on your scar and it will lessen it. If it's a new cut, if it's something new, it might outright get rid of it. It's a really deep old scar. It might not get rid of it entirely, but it can really help soften the edges and deal with some of the discoloration that might be there. Ladies, it won't help with stretch marks because that's a tear underneath the skin, not on top of the skin, right? But I like to just infuse calendula into avocado oil or castor oil. If it's a deep scar, you can make a calendula infused castor oil and then do castor oil packs nightly on top of the scar, and you'll start seeing results. But it takes time, it takes time, it takes time, it takes time. Okay, so best way to regulate hormones, specifically around the timing of bleeding. Here's what I need every woman here to hear. What you do 2 weeks before your period jurisdicts what your period will be like. We can take herbs while we're bleeding, like red clover to slow down clotting, or we can take shepherd's purse to slow down heavy bleeding, and while we're having it. But that doesn't really help assist the situation that we're in, other than in that moment. If 2 weeks prior if 2 weeks prior we are doing things like working on lowering our estrogen levels, if we are working on like increasing our progesterone, if we are using something like Vitex, if we are making sure that we're eating enough and that we're not stressed out and that we're sleeping better and that we're hydrated, what your period will be like 2 weeks later is night and day. Right. I really like Progest E. Um, it's like a natural based, vitamin E based progesterone supplement. You have to cycle with it. Usually it's between day 7 and 14 of your cycle. And remember, day 1 is the beginning of your period. Like that's the first day of your entire cycle is on the first day of your period. It's not the end of your cycle, it's the beginning of it. And so you would go out from there, start on day 7 and then go to day 14 and then quit, and then you're close to bleeding. And it makes a really big difference. So yeah, I went from like really bad, heavy, painful, exhausted periods, even with working with nourishing herbal infusions, to I don't know, really bleed heavy for the first day or two, and then it's just like light spotting throughout, with minimal cramping, and that's because, usually 2 weeks after, right around ovulation, I start really focusing on like supporting and nourishing my body, and working with things like Vitex and things to support my progesterone levels. I also like pine pollen. People really, when they think about pine pollen, they think about men because it has androgens in it, but it's really a crime how overlooked testosterone is in women. Because we have such a small amount of it, they don't think about it. They just think of us as estrogen, right? But we have a really small amount of testosterone. And when we become estrogen dominant, because we have such a small amount of testosterone, it's really easy to become really low in it, right? And when we're low in testosterone, we can have a low sex drive, we can have dryness down there, we can have really painful periods, we can have, so like if just before your period you get like like really intense like breast tenderness, and you get like really emotional, and you just, I'm not saying that some of that isn't natural, but a lot of it's because you already have really high estrogen, and then your estrogen is even higher, right? And so working with pine pollen has been helpful for me too. Okay, so somebody said, what do you try if you are prone to blood clots and can't take progesterone? Well, you don't have to take it directly. You can just work on removing soy products and soy isolates and soy lecithins and soy everything else they add, right? You can work on getting rancid seed oils out of your body. That way you can naturally reduce the estrogen levels, because you don't have to take progesterone to reduce your estrogen levels, but you have to do something that allows your body to go in the other way. The thing about the thing about rancid seed oils, PUFAs, is that, you know, you're talking about grapeseed, canola, you're talking about sunflower, you're talking about safflower, and almost every oil added to foods these days is a rancid seed oil because it's cheap, abundant, and they can bleach it to take the smell away over and over again and keep using it, right? They are allowed to do that. And so it's hard to avoid it, but if you can try to get that out of your diet, just stop cooking with it, look at the ingredients labels. My cart is limited when I shop because I'm like, fuck, there's sunflower oil in it. Huh, safflower, oh, canola oil, oh, soy lecithin, you know, it's in everything. But it makes a big difference. And then you can start working on vitamin E levels, because in nature, if you eat a walnut that's high in PUFA, just PUFA isn't bad. It's just the way we've been overabundant ourselves with it, right? In nature, that walnut is also really high in vitamin E, and that vitamin E is crucial to allowing your body to process out that PUFA. Um, but we get so depleted in vitamin E, and then estrogen clings onto PUFA like its best friend, and it builds up in our tissues. So even if you have a lab that says you're not estrogen dominant, you kind of have to go based on symptoms, because it stores in your fatty tissue. So like you don't really know, like if you are a man or a woman, more so with men but also with women, like if you have a lower stomach that's not always been there, right? Like it could be, of course, from insulin resistance and cortisol and stuff like that, but a lot of it's estrogen dominance. Now in men, when men get a bigger stomach and they kind of grow some breasts, that's estrogen dominance all day, every day long. You can spot somebody out who's estrogen dominant once you learn about it, and it's not their fault. That just they're eating the food that's available to them. But if we spot it and we learn about it, we can make impactful changes. Okay, so are pollen desensitization jabs a good idea? Severe grass pollen sufferer. She's talking about allergy shots. The thing to know about allergy shots, and the pamphlet that most people won't read, is they tell you that you cannot take them if you're enduring any sort of stress whatsoever, because they lower your immune system. They lower your immune system by constantly having your immune system in overdrive, right? So it's like you are constantly ran down. Now, my husband decided to do these allergy shots because they're like, oh, you have allergies, you need to take these shots. And he kept getting sicker and sicker. And like 3 months in, I'm like, man, it's allergy shots. You are exhausted because of the allergy shots. Sure enough, he stops the allergy shots, feels better. And I'm not saying that it's a bad idea. I'm saying I would rather work with something like bee pollen on a regular basis, especially if you can find local bee pollen or local bee honey. And only honey's made from bees, or local honey in your area. I would work on it that way, because in theory it's the same thing. You are ingesting a substance, your body is becoming more accustomed to it, and your immune system is calming down. But I would, this is definitely live. Yeah, someone's like, this isn't live. It is. Um, but I would definitely work on doing things like calming my immune system down. So when we have an allergic reaction to something in our environment, it's because our immune system's like, oh God, we're being invaded. We're we're being invaded, right? And so if you start doing things before the season starts, if you start working with like nettle infusion or nettle tincture, elderberry, people overlook elderberry for allergies, but she's amazing. You have to start before the season starts, and you start consistently using these things, and then you're calming down your immune system, you are helping combat that reaction, and you start eating local bee pollen or honey, I bet your reaction wouldn't be as bad. You know, of course, everybody's free to eventually, if you feel like the allergy shots are worth trying, give it a try, but definitely know that they say not to use it during times of stress or anything like that. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know anybody right now who isn't living with a little extra stress than we used to. Everybody keeps saying turn up the volume. I don't know if they're yelling at me or at somebody on here, but I don't. I mean, I guess I could. I'll bring it closer without knocking everything over. Okay, that's about the best I can do for turning up the volume because it's just my voice, not a radio. Okay. Um, okay, it might be on your end if you're not hearing me well. Last page. Okay. Okay. When I strained my lion's mane tincture, there was a gravy-like substance left over. Yeah, that's totally normal. It's the proteins that have broken down from the mushroom body itself. There's debates about it. Like, not that it's bad or good, but if it should be left or if it should be excluded. When you buy a commercial mushroom tincture, typically what they've done is they've allowed it to settle. So you get that glop at the bottom, and then they strain off the tincture from the top so people don't see it. But it always exists. There's no way to prevent it. I'm of the mind that you want to shake that in and use it. It'll look like boogers. It'll be fucking weird, but it's a part that's being extracted, and we know that a lot of the polysaccharides, like the PSK levels that are found in mushrooms, are found in the proteins. So arguably, when you take away that glop at the bottom and you don't shake it into your tincture every time you use it, you're not getting as many PSKs. You know. Okay, so the C word, prolonged. Prolonged loss of smell, almost a year, anything to get it back. So it's really hard for me because the C word used to mean something different. In my mind, I'm like, that C word took my smell away. But I know what we all know what we mean when we say the C now. So talked about it on the last one, but if I wanted, let me talk about this correctly. There's this thing that people are now using for depression and anxiety and trauma and PTSD and stuff, and they get a prescription for ketamine. You can do it online. There's many options to choose from. It's very effective for that. The thing that interests me the most about ketamine is the way it works. Basically, it it reconnects neural pathways in your brain. In your olfactory nerves, which are how you smell things, are neural pathways. And when I had a prescription for low dose ketamine, and it's like really low dose, like, I mean, you're not like, you feel it for like 20-30 minutes and then you're done, right? When I use that, my capacity to smell, I didn't even realize I had lost all that much of it, but like it came back with a vengeance. And I remember because we were walking down from the pasture, way up in the pasture, and it was raining, and I was on the porch with my son, who he's like 20 now, right? And he's like, I was like, oh my God, Jane, do you smell that? And he's like, what? I was like, the rain. I was like, I can smell the rain. And he was like, you're right, Mom, right? Because he didn't lose the smell. And like, you don't really realize how impactful it is until you lose it. But I would say that within about 2 weeks of using ketamine for my anxiety, that after researching and learning about the neural pathway connections, that suddenly I could smell. I like the company Joyous because it's self-directed. You just answer a bunch of questions on an app every day about how you're feeling and things like that. But there are other places that guide you through using it and things like that. But so yeah, if I lost my scent, it would be really interesting if I also decided to do something to help me with my depression and or anxiety, because it somehow brought back my sense of smell as well. Okay, so the next question is, and I intend to write a little booklet about it, like gaining back your smell in that way, because it's not like I can really openly talk about it on these platforms, right? Like it's risky what we talk about. I mean, there's a bunch of shit I've talked about on here that'll probably get me slapped from the powers that be. Okay, your take on how to be an herbal entrepreneur. I don't know. It's not like I intended to do this. So maybe that's my take. You have to not mean to do it, and then it just happens. But really, though, I would do anything and everything I could to give back more than I take, as much as you're able, whenever you're able. Um, a lot of people, I see them go into herbalism or herbal business or herbal thing in some way, and I'm not saying that they don't want to help people, but they don't really seem to have the why beyond the profit, right? They're not a real human on behind that screen. I'm not saying they aren't a real human. I'm saying like when they're like, "Hello, today we will talk about such and such and such and such," and they're more concerned with seeming perfectly put together and professional and on top of everything to build a reputation to be some celebrity herbalist or entrepreneur or whatever you want to be, than they are with the person who's supporting them, you know? And I talk about this a lot on my Instagram account and things, and it's ostracized me from the herbalism world, but I don't even care. But ultimately, like, you have to ask yourself why. And you got to ask deeper than I need money. You have to really look at it, because let me tell you, it will fucking grind you down. Like, look at me. I'm all right, but like I've been doing this publicly for a decade now, and I built a big business, a big following. And I didn't really try to do it. I just kind of did it. I just was myself. And for a long time on my Instagram account, I didn't even really talk about herbalism. I talked about my trauma and like things like that. And I just happened to make stuff as well. But I think that like we really have to be sure about what we're doing, because if you're not in this for anything besides the profit, you won't make it. You'll get ground down into dust just on a general existence, because we are running a type of business where we are expected to help everybody. Those boundaries are important, right? Like, I had a really hard time making up all these pages of questions that I answered, because there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds that I wasn't going to answer, and it's hard on me because my brain had an answer for every question they asked, right? And so it's really about like asking the why, like is this going to benefit people and the world beyond yourself, right? And it doesn't mean that we don't need to pay our bills and that it's not okay to run a small business and all that kind of stuff, but like at the end of the day, you better have pretty strong morals that guide you in regards to helping people heal, or it will just become about money. And then you look at the herbalism industry as like a whole, and you'll see what happens when it comes just about money. People are like, oh, for $400 I'll teach you how to make an infused oil. Oh, for $300 an hour I'll talk to you for, a little bit of nothing, and I'll charge you more than a doctor does per hour without insurance. Or they'll constantly say, well, I deserve to get paid. I'm like, well, yeah, but do you deserve to get paid like what it takes a person to make a minimum wage in a month? Right? And so you just have to really, really have those morals there. Um, Sit down and write with yourself about it in a journal. And then also from a business standpoint, don't let people shame you into like getting help. That was a big thing for me. Like how much I used my body like a machine, and like this concept that like if everything is handmade, it's somehow better. Like, y'all need to like taste my suffering. Right? Like, oh, if you're not like squeezing every bottle by hand or doing all this by hand, then you've sold out. I'm like, get out of here with that shit. Quit trying to tell women and beyond that the only way for the things we make to be of quality is if we like grind our body and ourselves to death to make them for people. Okay, so what homemade herbal oil could you recommend for a baby's skin for a newborn? Well, if they're a newborn, I would let their skin be. It's acclimating to being outside of you. Peeling is normal. If it gets really bad, just give them a gentle little bath and just very light exfoliation, because their skin hasn't their skin hasn't fully gotten strong yet, right? Like, give it a break. It's been in water for 9 months. But once they're like 2 or 3 months old, if you feel like they need a little bit of soothing, I would use an avocado oil, an organic one, and I would infuse it with something like organic oatmeal. Yeah, you can infuse oatmeal into oil. It works really fantastic. I use it for like my bearskin itch balm or my My Bearskin Itch Cream. It's one of the herbs in the serum that I make. It works really well. And then you could just use that oil. Now, chamomile is a great one too, but if you go with chamomile or any herb really, you need to do a little tiny test patch on the back of their little tiny leg, right behind the knee, to see if anything happens within 24 hours of putting it on there. Because the worst thing in the world, this is a new little human body. You don't know what their allergies are. You don't know what their individual makeup is. And just because you don't have allergies to something won't mean that they won't, right? And so you always want to do a test patch, because if you rub the baby down and they're allergic to it, my goodness, that wouldn't be great, because, it'd be their whole body having an allergic reaction. So always do a test patch. Um, this question is pregnancy safe herbs. I have become a little irrationally afraid to have any tea. Pregnancy is risky. It's risky for herbalists to say what you can or can't use. It's risky in general, but when it comes to herbs during pregnancy, if I was pregnant, would feel comfortable using food based herbs, right? Or things that have been used for a long time. Like chamomile, for example. Chamomile has been used for hundreds of years during pregnancy, to the point where most gynecologists will tell you that you can drink chamomile tea, which is a big deal, because most of them are like, I don't know, stay away from it. Chamomile's fine. Uh, Ginger, if you need it. Now, I wouldn't consume ginger all day, every day while I was pregnant, because it can cause uterine contractions in some people, but like, if you had like a small cup of ginger tea, it would probably be okay, or a ginger soda or something like that. Um, you could do milky oats or oat straw. That is literally oatmeal. It's just oatmeal. It's just the part of the plant that well, actually, the milky oat tops are what turns into the oat, right? But the oat straw is fine too. Just make sure that it's organic, so you're not drinking glycosides like crazy, the chemicals on it. um Anything food based, think about it. Is it a food? Can I eat this? When it comes to like caffeinated teas, caffeine isn't super great for the baby. If I was going to go that way, I would probably stick to white teas, which is in the green tea plant family. I probably wouldn't do coffee. Um, but yeah, I would stay away from anything mint. I don't care what anybody tells you. Stay away from mint. Mint is a uterine contractor, full stop. So people are like, oh, I drink peppermint tea constantly. And they're like, oh, I went into labor early. I'm like, um now but yeah, if you're afraid of it, like, I don't want you to like drink a cup of tea and have a panic attack because you think something bad might happen. But so if you just wanted to stick to chamomile would be great. um okay, so oh, you could also do like orange peel type teas, but again, make sure it's organic because all the chemicals. um This is a good one. How to tell if an infused oil went rancid. You'll know. Does it smell like a mouse crawled into a rotten gym sock and died in a hot car? Because, the smell of rancid oil is on par with nothing else. It will smell like death. It will smell horrendous. Now, if the herb itself has a really pungent, nasty smell, the oil might smell like that. Like, you better believe if you infuse valerian root into some oil, it's going to stink horribly. But if you're working with something that's not, you're like, I made a chamomile infused oil and it smells like something fucking died, your oil has gone rancid. Now, rancid isn't the same thing as moldy. If you use fresh herbs when you're making an herbal infused oil, the mold and fungus likely won't have a smell. Rancid is when the oil itself goes bad, but it can't grow a mold or fungus or bacteria, not really, unless you've introduced water with fresh herbs, which is why I pretty much only use dried herbs in my blends. Somebody said ketamine for MS. Uh, I haven't looked into it. It's a possibility. There's been lots of studies on it. I meant to say, I should have answered somebody's question about, they asked about Parkinson's as well as MS. Um, and all of that, all day long, there's so much research on You bet you can guess what I'm going to say. B12 deficiency. I mean, you know what happens when you eventually don't have enough B12 in your body, right? Your muscle connections start to break down, your brain's ability to communicate with your arms and your body in general starts to shut down. Eventually, your organs will fail and your lungs will stop working. And there are a lot of people in the B12 deficiency community that were diagnosed with MS that didn't have MS. They had a B12 deficiency. I mean it. I'm not pulling this out of my ass. You can go anywhere and read about it in those communities. People who were told they were going to die now no longer have symptoms because it was a B12 deficiency. So I, again, would buy that book, Could It Be B12? Okay, so I have 4 different kinds of your Synergism capsules. Is it safe to take them all together daily? You know, just like before when I talked about the tincture question, if they can take it all together daily, once you've gotten to know how each one makes you feel, you can then start pairing them with an individual and see how that makes you feel. You can also spread them out throughout the day, and you can also cycle with them where you're like, well, for 1 week I'll be taking this Synergism capsule. Next week I'll take this one. And then I'll, you know what I mean, or just 2 in that day and 2 in this day. So you don't completely overwhelm your body. It's not like they would hurt you if you took them together, but every individual body is different and how it reacts to herbs. So take it slow in combining them and be like, you know what? I put these 2 together and it didn't feel great, but I didn't notice anything that didn't feel bad if I took them a few hours apart. Right, because remember you're digesting it. So if you take a capsule in the morning, come afternoon when you take one, they will never meet in between. Right? So that's just something to consider. And the last question here is there anything that can help regenerate gum tissue? I've heard dragon's blood resin. Just get some Yarrow tincture. Yarrow is all about regenerating tissue in your mouth. You could do a Yarrow tincture that you brush with every day. You could make Yarrow tea and swish with it, gargle with it. You don't even need to swallow the Yarrow. You just need to get it onto your gums. And that's it. Took me an hour and a half. It took me 2 hours because I talked half an hour. I talked half an hour earlier, so. And this one's an hour and a half, so that's 2 hours. I'm trying. I'm trying. I am trying so hard to train my brain to say less. I don't know if it'll ever happen because I want to do these herbal Q&As every week on top of my What's Happening Wednesday and then a live pop-up on Sunday. Ooh, ambitious, right? I'm trying to do 3 videos a week. But I don't think I could do them every week if I talk to the point that my throat gets sore, right? Like I'm trying to keep it within an hour. Plus, these really long format videos, anything over an hour, like y'all are here watching, but people don't really stick to it, you know, the whole way through. And so even down to a half an hour would be great, but I don't think my brain will let me do that. But I will work on it. I will work on it. I want to be more present here. I think I'm still going to do my live pop-up classes on Instagram because it's the only way that I can get them there. When I'm done with this video, because they took away IGTV over there, I can't upload anything besides a stupid reel that's 90 seconds long. And for those of you that have been here with me, 90 seconds is a very short amount of time for my brain to share any information. In any way that makes me feel satisfied. The What We Do Wednesday, I'm trying to keep that one to 5 minutes because I couldn't get it any shorter than that. But that's the amount that I can upload a longer video to Instagram is 5 minutes or under. They might let me post it as a reel, but this is not possible. So if you want to support my capacity to come on here and jump off and do stuff in the middle of a video and talk until my throat gets sore and answer questions and teach freely and just be my weird self, when this is posted and stuff, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share. Sharing is important. It gets information out there to other people, helps them realize they're smart enough, find my channel, all that kind of stuff. And if you want to support my capacity to teach freely, consider following the link in my bio, or going directly to sheasofthewoods.org, or the description link in the bottom of this video for future people that are watching. Will take you there. And anything you call home from my shop supports my capacity to teach freely. I don't do anything else besides teach freely and work in my apothecary. There is no other way. So thank you so much for hanging out, and I will um, see you next week, hopefully. Bye.